So as the impacts of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA as most of us know it, begin to take place, the question of what happens to these agricultural lands that will be fallowed is one that's on the top of many landowners' minds. So our next presenter is Jack Rice with the Rancher Technical Assistance Program, which is funded through the California Cattle Council. It's a free program. It'll plug for you, Jack, that for folks that have questions or need some help maneuvering through the programs. Jack's also a rancher in Humboldt County and was recently retired from the Rangeland Trust Board. And he's a former attorney with the California Farm Bureau Federation. So Jack's here to tell us more about a proposed land repurposing program. So take it away, Jack.
Good morning, and thank you. Can you hear me all right, Michael?
Sounds great, sir.
Perfect. So what I'm going to provide just a little bit of information on is the Multi-Benefit Land Repurposing Program in the Department of Conservation. Came out of last year's budget. So I'll jump back a little bit to build on what Michael said about this being driven by SGMA. So when you're looking at SGMA implementation in the San Joaquin Valley, there's a range of estimates, but everybody knows that more acreage is currently being irrigated than will be as groundwater sustainability is achieved. And so those figures range from a couple 100,000 acres to up to 1 million acres of land that will come out of irrigated production and go into something else. Now that transition is going to be largely driven by water supply and implementing groundwater sustainability programs. But as everybody steps back, there's a kind of a general recognition that this transition, which will be very troubling and challenging for many communities in the valley, if done well, the harms can be less, the benefits can be greater, and the overall success of SGMA implementation is likely to be more likely to occur, I should say. So that's why this thought of looking comprehensively at how can you do this or help shape this land transition that is somewhat inevitable to some degree. We don't know the exact acreage, but there'll be a lot. How can you do that well? And so obviously it has to reduce water use. The future benefits, like what is the land use going to be in the future? Is it going to be energy production, solar? Is it going to be habitat, another form of agriculture, recharge basin, flood control, parks for communities, whatever that'll be? They realize that if you can think about what this looks like and find ways to try to encourage certain types of land uses, that's going to be better. Obviously, multi-benefit, this idea of having things provide several services. So like talking about grazing public lands for what it does for the livestock industry, what it does for fire resiliency and habitat, that's the concept that's behind it. Coordinating it, making sure that it's tied together with this between these groundwater sustainability agencies and aligns with habitat goals and the needs of communities. The way SGMA is implemented, there's a lot of these groundwater sustainability agencies that have limited jurisdictions and they have to follow this water budget. So they have to act independently, but it's also a lot of value if they can coordinate. And then finally, just the economics of it, finding ways to make this transition and encourage this transition to be done as well as possible, finding those economic incentives to minimize the disruption, the harm, and provide opportunities for an economy built around maybe a little less irrigated agriculture, but maybe not, that doesn't mean a whole lot less agriculture entirely. Little background, PPIC did a paper, the Public Policy Institute of California, and they estimated 535 to 750,000 acres. So in that big range I gave earlier, they narrowed it down to that 500,000 to 750,000 acres. And after they had accounted for pretty much as many opportunities they could find for habitat, for recharge, for flood control, and for solar, there was still a 360,000 acres that weren't sure what the future was going to look like. And what that brought to my mind is always like, well, rangeland, a lot of that could fit really well is rangeland in the future. We don't know what that'll look like, but that's one option. So now turning back to the multi-benefit land repurposing program. Originally, the Governor Newsom had proposed a $500 million in his budget. Well, actually, one step before that, EDF had AB 252, which was Rivas and Salas had a bill to create this program in the Department of Conservation. That ended up stalling in the Senate. Then Governor Newsom had proposed $500 million for a program as part of his budget. Ultimately, that was whittled down to $50 million, and that's what has started this program. In this year's budget, he's proposing to add another 40 million to that. And I know there's a lot of interest in seeing if that could even be a greater number. So this is created through the budget as opposed to the original legislation. I will post in the chat the link to the program. So the program right now, it's available. There's a draft of the guidelines, the grant guidelines that are available for comment. The comment period closes the end of this month, so just a few days. And this will be how they divvy up that $50 million. Basically, there's going to be 3 types of grants. There's regional block grants. There is a statewide support entity category, and then grant options for tribes. So I think the core of this is intended to be these regional block grants, and they expect there'll be like 3 to 5 of these grants. They can be up to or approximately $10 million. They'll go for 4 years, and then the region, because they are regional, it's sort of flexible, but all this is for the basins that have to comply with SGMA. And I think there'll be a lot of focus on the critically overdrafted basins in particular, but these are for SGMA basins. Those entities that are eligible, it's groundwater sustainability agencies, nonprofits, public agencies, tribes, of course. The key is that any entity other than a tribe or a GSA, they have to coordinate with the groundwater sustainability agency. So the agencies have to, whoever is applying for the grant, the goal is to fit this into the implementation of SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. What they're going to do through the grant is you're going to develop a plan. So this will be that multi-benefit land repurposing plan. And so in addition to transitioning the land out of to using less water or no water, it also has to provide some other benefit. That's the multi part of it. So community health, economic well-being, water supply, habitat, renewable energy, climate benefits. It can cover a broad spectrum. In general, I think the ideas have been around habitat. Obviously, solar farms have been discussed, recharge basins or flood basins where water can go into that won't be farmed, dry land farming, or even crops that use very little water. And rangeland is also an opportunity here. It'll include project development, permitting, and implementation as well. The statewide support entities, this is just, I think, more of a technical assistance umbrella that where an entity that's involved in this could get up to a couple $2 million to support the block grants, support the tribes and other engaged socially disadvantaged communities to be part of the land repurposing. And for the tribal grants, there's, I don't believe there's a maximum. I don't think they have to be federally recognized. Oh, I see that question came up in the chat. So I don't believe they do. I'll find that out really quickly. And then it's similar purposes. It's the same overall goals. This is about the land improving the groundwater conditions in the basins. So like I mentioned, those comments will close at the end of this month, January 31st. They expect to release the guidelines in mid-February. Applications will be due April 1st, and the awards will be made May 16th. A lot of work is going to happen very quickly in regards to this program. So I went over that really fast, but I think I used up my time. Do you want to pivot to questions, Michael?
Got to get back online here. You bet. And you addressed a couple of those, Jack. What are some of the key issues with the program concept that you see, particularly if something happens down the road and we actually have more or increased water supply in California? So some of those terms of the contracts, transferability, what are some of those key points that you see in the program that need to be included?
Yeah, this is really an interesting question, because the big idea is pretty easy to understand. Doing it well and the details of how do you get land repurposed in this coordinated way, in this flexible way that meets the needs of the San Joaquin Valley community in particular. I saw that question came up in chat. As an aside, my expectation, and I'm uninformed, I'm not an insider in this by any means, I do think a lot of this will be focused on the critically overdrafted basins of the San Joaquin Valley. So what does it take? I think that we may need some new tools for what we're trying to achieve. And this is my own opinion. You don't, permanent conservation easements like they've been done in the past, I think they'll certainly be part of the suite, but we're also looking at areas where, to give an example, there's an older almond orchard on some really good farm ground may need to come out of production now, because that's just how the economics are. And it'd be great to put that into something else, habitat or whatever else. But 15 years from now, it may be better that goes back into farm ground, and another piece up in the foothills goes back into rangeland when those almonds have reached the end of their economic life. So we need maybe some flexibility on how we approach what needs to be done there. And I don't know that those tools are out there. And I think people are very used to using the familiar tools, and that may pose a challenge to us. This program is, as I understand it, is designed to be very flexible and to encourage those new tools, but I don't know that they've been figured out entirely.
How would landowners provide that input to the department in this stage of the development of the program?
That's a good question. I don't know for landowners, when you read through the grant, this grant is about giving money to entities that will work on a regional scale primarily. And so it's really going to be up to those entities. Certainly if a landowner can read through this and find specific issues where they see an obstacle might arise, that's great. But for the most part, it's going to be working with groundwater sustainability agencies to see how if they're saying, hey, I want to take land out, or land can come out of production, to address their particular needs and benefit their groundwater sustainability agencies' work on achieving sustainable groundwater management. Great, but how does that fit into a regional program? Can they add in these habitat benefits through this multi-benefit land repurposing, and what does that look like? So for, I think, individual landowners, it's going to be talking to your GSA and talking to the organizations, EDF, Audubon, whoever is working on these, thinking about these issues on a larger scale, talking to those two groups and trying to get your, be noticed, I guess you might say.
Great, thank you, Jack. Any other questions for Jack Rice on this program? I think you have some support for you. American Farmland Trust would love to partner with folks on this program.
Yeah, I would just say, I think it was listed in the legislation. My own personal hope is that there is an opportunity for land to go back into rangeland, and then that could occur in many areas, and that could be a really good long-term solution for land that's well managed, and it provides multi-benefits. And so the more thoughts on that, the better chance it has.
Yeah, I know, as you know, Jack, the Rangeland Trust has been working with you and others on this to try to find that solution as well. And some of these issues that are an opportunity to get some of these lands back into rangeland that otherwise could just sit fallow.